Welcome back to Let's Analyze Elsword Revamped. For every video, there's a link in the description if you'd like to read my fanfiction of Elsword before watching further. There are plenty of notable differences between the original game lore and what's in this chapter, so I'll do my best to explain why. Despite having the shortest chapter word count so far, I've got plenty to talk about. The first paragraph says a lot. Any restricting chains from Rose are from her skill named Kill Point. I know the maximum restriction time is 2 seconds, but for narrative purposes, that time limit is extended. You might be wondering why the tattoo on her back is seemingly alive, because it's just a normal tattoo in Rose's black massacre job. However, almost everyone who's been affected by Dark El has had some kind of demonic mutation on their body, which makes their affliction more obvious and concerning. I wanted this tattoo to be a visual measurement of Rose's Dark El, so it's not just Ein who can tell she has too much of that. We learn that our new character perspective is Ein, because he senses the Dark El from Rose. While this chapter could have been done well in Rose's perspective for more emotional appeal, his point of view does an outstanding job at describing how Ein is not a paragon hero. Similar to Elsword's dream sequences in Chapter 1, Ein's dream here was a self-determined premonition, meaning the person with the dream believes it to be foreshadowing of real events to come without any evidence. The reason why I wanted this dream to be cut so short is because I didn't want the reader to be confused with thinking this was actually happening. Unlike Elsword's dreams that had an illogical detail, the appearance of Elysis who shouldn't be in Reuben, this is plausible. Maybe readers would think Rose becomes more abusive to maintain a commanding position in the Secret Service team. Now that Ein is awake, it's time to add more sensory details that couldn't be in his dream. The chains over him are incredibly hot, which makes sense as they've been exposed to the sun for an extended period of time. Speaking of the sun, it's directly above, which is the same description Rena provided in Chapter 4, thus the time of day is noon, and Chapter 5 is happening around the same time as Chapter 4. This copper-brown machine is from Rose's skill, Air Mecha Gale Force. Chapter 5 is the first to mention the goddess Ishmael, but I didn't want Ein to explain her now because she's not relevant yet. Rose can dismiss the chains from kill points at any time, which isn't in her gameplay at all, but this change is more for showing her control over the Dark El than resembling gameplay. Remember how Ein discovered Rose and Zero's hiding spot on the Tree of El? His sensing picked up Rose's high amount of Dark El, which is why he engaged her. This isn't an accidental joke from Ein. Him being so direct without consideration of how Rose's emotions would be stirred up is a huge indication of either his lack of understanding people's emotions or his lack of respect. From his sigh in asking for permission to revise his own request, Ein clarifies that it's not his lack of respect, it's his lack of understanding people's emotions, which can be seen as disrespectful. When Ein breaks his pendulum, it's a reference to how he does that in his dungeon entering animation, and it's necessary to break in order to unlock his full power. The only reason it was excluded in Chapter 2 is because he already broke it before Zero saw him for the first time. Ein's 3 shining bullets, with the last one being a Wind L blast, is him doing his triple X up X combo. We see how much Ein values Rose's consideration here, which is very little, and the next paragraph shows he sees her and Zero for what they bring to the table instead of who they are as people. Yggdrasil leaves cure all status ailments in game, so they're perfect to stop the bleeding ailment. By this point, you're probably wondering why there's so much dense fog when there wasn't any in Reuben's White Mist Swamp dungeon. In the Adam's Welcome Party side quest, Adam describes a lot of fog in the dungeon when trying to find the hidden elf village Rena is from, so it must be a hiding ability that the elves have for protection whenever someone gets too close, which seems like Secret Service did. To us players who have seen what phoru look like, the ancient phoru doesn't look like a demon, but to Zero who's never seen phoru, this does look like a demon. This is the first time Nazods are mentioned, and considering Rose's ignorance, it's the perfect time to explain what Nazods are compared to her robots. If you remember from Chapter 3, Rena called Walle's Nazod a robot, so either she couldn't tell it was a Nazod, or she is also ignorant of what Nazods are. The good thing about Ein's lack of emotional consideration is how level-headed he is. Right away, he's able to see how horrible of a plan Rose made. Instead of changing his plan to accommodate her feelings, he's changing it to prevent her from endangering herself. This is definitely something we wouldn't figure out if this chapter wasn't in Ein's perspective. If it was from Rose's or Zero's perspective, we would have had the implication of Ein showing emotional consideration by changing his plan in response to Rose's anger. Flower and Leaf's protection is the Chinese translation of Ein's skill, Blatt Blume, and he's using it to heal the ancient phoru. Here's the most controversial thing in this chapter. Banthus kills the ancient phoru instead of mind-controlling it with the magical pendants. Let's be real here, it's a diabolus ex machina when Banthus got a pendant to control a holy beast to make it attack the Elsword party. There's no foreshadowing that Banthus could get his hands on something like this. That's why it changed the White Mist Swamp lore, so the ancient phoru attacks Wille and Banthus' minions to get the Elstone because it makes sense. The holy beast would be the last line of defense for something as important as Reuben's Elstone. Banthus getting a magical pendant from who knows where, and knows to use it against the ancient phoru does not make any sense. It's really hard to not make a splish noise when you're tiptoeing in a wet grassland, so it's no wonder Rose overheard Ein's approach. This quote, "You're the one who's corrupted," is my favorite line from this chapter because it turns around the whole perspective's focus. Before, Ein was so concerned about Rose's dark elf corruption that the reader probably didn't think about how inhuman Ein behaved throughout this chapter. Now that Rose said this, I wanted to shine the spotlight on what Ein did to show how corrupted he was with her next line, "You don't mourn for the dead or care about how I feel." This is very true. I never cared about who died or what Rose felt, so according to her human understanding, his behavior is corrupt. With that in mind, readers might be hesitant on believing what Ein thinks about Rose's words. Is it really her dark elf corruption that's making her be so aggressive, or is it her human instinct to purge what is corrupt? When Ein is thinking about what to say in response, this is yet another glowing example of his perspective showing us something we wouldn't learn from anyone else's point of view. He's telling a change in himself not because he wants to change, but because he doesn't want to die. Now that I've explained myself, I hope it's clear that Ein is not like most protagonists. He's very much an anti-hero. For future chapters, I will rarely be having them done in Ein's perspective again, because as you can see, he's got quite the attitude against other people's emotions, which isn't very enjoyable to read often. Not only that, but unless the environment affects him in some way, he won't describe it because it's not necessary to his goals. It's a stark contrast to Rena's perspective from chapter 4, so I apologize if the lack of setting was rough to get past. If you like this video or the fanfiction, show your support in the comments or with a review on fanfiction.net.